They told me to sit by the kitchen door, the heat from dishwater and clang of cutlery marking my place, while the family toasted to legacies I was never invited to share. I watched them laugh when Amanda drawled, "Well, at least she's here now, scrubbing floors instead of files," her words slicing deeper than any glare. I sat at the end of the table, chewing silence. Fork hits the plate like a slow verdict. No one asking where I'd been. No one remembering the lives I once saved. The orders I gave in places too dark to name. They poured wine into cracked glasses, ignoring the lines running through them like they ignored mine. I swallowed the burn of memory, let the room fold over itself in polite forgetting, until the door swung wide. He wasn't family. He wasn't friend. Just a stranger in uniform scanning the room, eyes widening in disbelief as he said it clear enough to split the air. "Ma'am, federal agent?" And the room went silent. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing. The chandelier's glow fell in thick, dusty pools that made every smile look waxen, too shiny, too stiff. I sat near the kitchen door, where the cold from outside leaked in each time it swung open, brushing my arm, making the hairs stand on end. The hiss of steam and clatter of pots cut through laughter like a reminder that I didn't belong at this table. My fingers played with a stiff linen napkin on my lap, folding it, unfolding it, pretending I couldn't hear the hush that came whenever I moved. Candles burned low, along the center of the table, throwing enough light to make silver and crystal gleam. Glasses clinked in polished toasts, but none were raised in my direction. Vivian caught every question with a smile that belonged in photographs, voice gentle, careful, practiced for the crowd. They leaned toward her, asked about colors, music, plans. When I tried to speak, my chair scraped too loudly. Heads turned, eyes polite, surprise there for only a breath before they turned away, conversation closing in like water over stone. My mother passed behind me, her perfume sharp and old, tugging at memory like an old bruise. She rested a hand on my shoulder for a heartbeat too short, fingers lifting away before they settled. "You look nice," she said, voice pitched low to avoid drawing attention, eyes already sliding past me to Vivian. Across the table, someone laughed at something Vivian said, their head tipped back, teeth shining in candlelight. An uncle tried to remember me. He asked if I was still doing that thing, voice careful as if the words were fragile. I opened my mouth to answer, but Vivian laughed just then, voice ringing like glass, pulling all attention with it. His eyes shifted with relief, happy to look away. I closed my mouth without finishing, the answer thick in my throat. I picked up my wine glass, turned it in my fingers so the candlelight bled through the last of the liquid. Down the table, glasses met with a musical chime that carried. Mine clinked once, dull and thin, before I set it down. A fork dropped against a plate in the hush, scraping the silence raw for a second before the room closed over it. The table was long, dressed in perfect folds of white linen, but my chair felt crooked, squeezed against the wall where the cold leaked in. The family portraits watched from the dark beyond, frames catching the dull light, Vivian's face clear at the center, mine blurred at the edge, half shadow where the varnish had cracked. I let my hands rest in my lap, fingers curling until the knuckles showed white. I didn't speak again. I listened to the sound of my own breath as it fought to stay even. I watched the candles burn down slow, wax pooling in quiet drips no one would notice. And when they laughed again, warm and easy, I kept my mouth closed, let the sound pass through me like I wasn't there at all. The candles burned low along the table, their light catching glass and silver but dying before it reached me. Pressed against the window, where the cold settled in slow, quiet drafts. My chair had been added last, wedged at the edge where the shadows pooled thick, the leg uneven against the floor. Every time someone shifted, I felt the movement rock through the wood. I watched wax drip and harden, lines of white crawling down the brass, leaving a stain no one would see. Near the wall stood a photo in its polished frame, faces crowded together, heads touching, teeth shone bright in laughter. I counted them once and found no gap for me. My name hadn't been called that day. No arm slung around my shoulders to pull me in. I let my eyes rest on the edge where the frame had been chipped and repainted, the cover glass dull from years of dusting. On the sideboard the dish I brought sat cold, foil peeled back unevenly, the steam long gone. Someone balanced another plate in front of it, store-bought cookies with glossy icing, arranged in a ring that caught every eye. When my mother called for help, her voice softened and turned toward Vivian, the name shaped warmly in her mouth, slipping from her like second nature. I pressed my napkin into my lap until the crease held, fingers going slow, careful. A cousin asked about the flowers on the table, and another answered quick, naming Vivian as the planner. The conversation closed around that name like a door latching shut. I remembered the phone call I made to confirm delivery, the tip folded in my coat pocket, but I didn't say anything. The spoon stirred tea with a rhythmic scrape, metal tapping porcelain too quickly, the uneven beat loud in the hush. I picked up my glass, turned it so the candlelight slid across the surface, warming the wine to a dull red, but didn't drink. My thumb smudged the rim once before I set it back down with care. I watched the ring of moisture it left on the cloth, wiped it with the edge of my napkin, no one noticing. I tried to speak once, voice catching at the edge of a sentence before someone's question to Vivian cut across mine. She answered gently, her laugh small and easy, the conversation bending toward her, leaning in. I closed my mouth, swallowing the words that dried up behind my teeth. Across the table, a quiet laugh rolled, then hushed polite. My mother's perfume drifted in the air, sharp and sweet, pulling me back years and half a breath. I felt the chill of the window seep through the chair, through the fabric of my dress. I shifted once, the wood creaking under my weight, a small sound no one looked toward. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass, knuckles paling, breath pressed out slow through my nose, steadying so it wouldn't shake. I kept my eyes on the table, on the flickering edge of candlelight that didn't reach me, listening to the scrape of cutlery, the easy talk, the pause where my name never landed. The lights above pooled around Vivian where she stood, her voice calm, grateful, shaped for the room. The glow caught on her hair in warm bands that made the rest of the table turn toward her naturally. My chair was back from the edge, cloth folded wrong under me, half in shadow where the candles couldn't quite reach. She rested one hand on the back of the chair that used to be mine in every family photo, smiling slowly as they praised her again. Vows rippled polite along the wood, palms tapping softly, my mother's voice warm with her name, repeating it twice like a blessing. I watched mouths shape the syllables easily, eyes crinkling with admiration that didn't question who deserved it. The sound of it seemed to land heavy on the tablecloth before moving on without me. Vivian tilted her head at the right angle, humble, accepting. Her words quiet but clear enough to carry. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the cabinet behind her, a blurred shape edged in candlelight, cut by the frame into two halves. Hers was bright, clean, unbroken, mine ghosted behind, lost in the glare. I shifted once, felt the chair scrape the floor just enough to make my stomach pull tight. No one turned. They asked how she arranged the seating, the colors, the flowers. She explained carefully, fingers brushing the tablecloth, as if to smooth it for them. And my mother nodded slowly, as though it was the first time she'd heard the plan. No one glanced my way to remember the calls, the lists folded in my coat pocket. I rubbed the edge of my dress between two fingers until the fabric thinned with heat. A laugh cut the hush, gentle but sharp enough to stop me from opening my mouth. I let my lips part and close again, felt the dryness in my throat catch and hold. My hand found the glass in front of me, thumb sliding over the rim without lifting it. The wine inside held no shine here, its color gone to dull brown in the leftover light. I watched them lean in, heard the soft thud of hands on backs, the murmured praise looping again with her name at the center. The shadows she cast on the wall behind her fell long, whole, while mine was lost behind stacked dishes, breaking at the handles and lids. My mother's perfume drifted past on the warm air, familiar enough to tighten my chest. I stayed there, back straight, fingers curled around cold glass, watching the candlelight flicker for her, waiting for the glow to spill far enough to touch me, but knowing it wouldn't, holding my breath because I didn't trust what would come out if I let it go. The candles along the table had burned low enough that the wicks glowed dull and red, the wax pooling in uneven circles no one bothered to wipe. I leaned forward, elbows just brushing the edge of the cloth, turning slightly toward my cousin beside me. My voice was softer than I meant when I began to speak, fingers worrying the stem of my glass. I tried to tell them about the time I'd stayed up folding the invitation cards by hand, the old dining room light buzzing overhead, my mother checking the envelopes twice to be sure. I felt my hand lift slightly, palm open, as if to offer the memory out. The words found their way out slow, a half laugh breaking up the sentence. For an instant, his head angled toward me, polite interest flickering across his brow. But before the next part of my story settled, someone at the far end let out a sharp laugh. Bright and easy. A glass clinked in approval, the sound too big for the narrow room. Vivian's name fell clear in that same breath, praised again for the seating plan, the timing, the flowers arranged just so. My voice caught mid-word, mouth still parted as I watched the attention tilt and shift down the line. I waited, listening to the hush that followed the laugh, hoping the silence might return to me. But it didn't. Someone else picked up the thread, talking about next weekend, the guest list, the caterer's lemon cake. I turned back, slow, fingers flattening around the base of my glass. The condensation slid under my thumb. No one asked me to finish. The polite hum of the table resumed its old rhythm without skipping, the silver tapping gently against porcelain. I cleared my throat once but didn't try again, letting the unfinished sentence close on its own. My hand dropped to my lap. I let the other smooth the edge of the napkin where I'd creased it too hard, folding it smaller and smaller until it fit under my palm. Across the table, the light found Vivian's cheekbones perfectly, the shadows neat under her jaw. She didn't see me watching, didn't know the words I still held. When someone said her name, it landed clear, ringing once, then twice. I felt my chest tighten, breath moving carefully so it wouldn't catch. I let my eyes drift to the plate in front of me, tracing the curve of the rim with a thumb damp from the glass. The room was warm, but I felt the chill settle in at my spine, a small space growing behind my ribs where the words went to die. I exhaled once, slow enough it didn't make a sound. When I looked up again, they were laughing at something new. I pressed my lips together until they held, and I didn't open them again. The light fell warmest on her, gathering in a soft circle around the seat she'd claimed so easily, while the rest of the table bent toward her voice with the kind of hush meant for something worth hearing. Someone laughed at her joke, the sound spilling like wine over the rim of the evening, and my mother's head tipped back, eyes shining with approval that softened every line in her face. The words, so thoughtful, and never seen anyone plan so beautifully, floated over the table in low, admiring currents, repeated like they were trying the shape of them out for the first time. I sat where the glow faded, fingers loose around the base of my glass. It wasn't far, but felt far enough to dull the edges of everything they said. I could see her hand move with quiet confidence, gathering attention without asking, the way the light clung to her skin in a way that made it clear whose moment this was meant to be. I watched the reflections dance in the wine she lifted, in an easy toast. Her name said with such fondness, it held the space for a beat too long, and I heard the words echo in the way they lifted their glasses in turn. I didn't raise mine. I turned it slowly, thumb pressing into the cool, sweating stem. My mouth parted to say something about the centerpieces, the order, the colors, the calls I remembered making so carefully, but the sentence stayed half-built in my chest. A question about the seating went her way, and she answered without rushing, voice even, reassuring. I let my eyes rest on the candlelight catching in the cut of the glassware, blinking once when someone said, "We've never had anyone do it quite this well." I shifted in my chair, adjusting the hem of my sleeve, so the crease would lie flat. The wood creaked beneath me, but no one turned. I exhaled slow, watching her thank them, her smile humble, patient. I remembered a smile like that in my own mouth once, but it didn't seem to fit anymore. My mother's hand brushed her shoulder in passing, fingers lingering with a familiarity I could almost feel from where I sat. A cousin said her name again, warmly, clearly, as though they needed to be sure she knew she was welcome here, and I felt something pressing tight behind my ribs, the question blooming quiet, why not me? But the words didn't come. I watched the way their bodies angled toward her, the way they moved to make space, the way the light made the wall behind her glow. I looked for my own shadow, but found it broken by the shape of the sideboard, warped across drawers no one opened anymore. My fingers eased from the glass, palms settling on the table. I let my shoulders lower by an inch, feeling the tension leave without relief, the space between my breath growing. I didn't try to join in. My gaze drifted down to the floor, where the light lost its strength, a dull patch beneath my chair, and I watched it until someone called her name again, lifting their glass clear and high while mine stayed on the table, untouched. The laughter carried in low waves across the room, voices blending with the faint clink of silver and the warm hush of music piped through hidden speakers. I watched them from the edge of the table, the angle just wrong enough that the centerpiece blocked half their faces when they leaned in to toast her name. The candlelight caught the glass in their hands, throwing small reflections onto the tablecloth, tiny constellations that didn't include me. I let my gaze drift over their shoulders, past the moving mouths, settling on the way the light shaped them all into a single shared glow that felt too far to reach. My fingers rested lightly on the folded napkin in my lap. I turned it once, twice, smoothing the crease I'd pressed too hard earlier. For a moment I paused, thumb pressing into the edge as though I might say something, might ask to stay just a little longer, but my hand fell away before I could. I looked around once more, scanning the faces that didn't turn, the laughter that didn't slow, and I felt the room slide just out of focus, the sounds pulling away like water receding from shore. I moved carefully, slowly, letting the chair legs scrape the floor in a hush that was softer than the music. I pushed the chair back with deliberate quiet, leaving it angled neatly, as though no one had been there at all. The fabric of my dress whispered against the table's edge as I rose, hand brushing over the wood in a touch so light, it didn't leave a mark. I reached for my coat, draped over the back, fingers slipping into the sleeve with the practiced slowness of someone who'd done it alone too many times. As I turned, I paused, looking back once at the empty space I'd left behind. The glass I'd held sat untouched, catching only the dimmest rim of light, the wine inside unmoved, dark. The napkin lay folded, small, quiet as breath. No one glanced my way. No one shifted to make room or called my name with that bright urgency of wanting me to stay. The music didn't pause. The laughter rolled on, soft and easy, undisturbed. I let my eyes settle on the frame of the doorway, the edge of the light cutting across the floor in a line I would have to cross. My hand rose to touch the doorframe lightly, fingers trailing along the cool paint as I passed. The coat settled heavy around my shoulders, absorbing the warmth I'd lost at the table. The last thing I saw was the space I'd left. Chair tucked in, glass waiting, candle flickering like it might go out, the room shifting to fill the gap without even noticing it was there. The laughter felt muted from where I stood, just past the glow that settled on them in easy layers. I watched her lean forward to straighten the folded napkin at the center of the table, fingers pinching the fabric in the same careful line I remembered doing so many times it had become muscle memory. She smiled as she turned the vase of flowers just so, checking the angle with her head tilted, the way I used to make sure the petals faced out for photos. The light caught her hair in a band of warm color, and someone lifted a phone to take a picture, calling her name twice to be sure she was ready. My hand rested at my side, thumb brushing over the hem of my dress. A voice from the other end of the table recounted the year they first did the big dinner, describing the handmade place cards and the local flowers, like it had all been her idea. The words drifted, unchecked, no one correcting them. My fingers curled slow, pressing into my palm once before releasing. I tried to hold the memory in my head clearly, the kitchen light humming, the stack of cards, the pen that stained my fingers, but it slipped like water through a closed fist. I caught someone's glance, sliding over me without stopping, landing instead on her. Their smile bloomed warm and genuine, lines at the corners of their eyes deepening, as if relief came just from knowing she was there to take care of things. I shifted back a step without thinking, the scuff of my shoe low against the floor. The edge of the rug caught my heel for half a second, grounding me where the hallway met the dining room. She reached for the wine bottle, pouring carefully into tilted glasses, her voice rising just enough to invite them to toast. I watched my own glass sit full, beads of condensation, tracking lines down the stem to the untouched pool at its base. I breathed once, slow, letting my shoulders drop by an inch. The invitation to join the group photo passed easily over my head. I watched them arrange themselves, arms wrapping around shoulders, her name said clear and laughing, as they told her to squeeze in tighter to the center. I stayed outside the frame. The camera didn't find me. My hands brushed at my side, like they might have been holding something once, but they were empty now. The flash caught the wall behind me in a glare that made my own reflection in the glass cabinet dull, smudged, while hers stood out clear and lit from within. I let my eyes rest there for a moment, seeing the two of us overlapped, her shape brighter, mine fading at the edges. And in the quiet between breaths, the words formed but didn't finish. I used to. The rest fell away before it could make a sound. The music had softened as the evening wore on, the laughter at the main table settling into low hums and interrupted clinks of silver on china. I had moved to the edge of the room, the corner where the light didn't quite reach, but didn't go fully dark. My hands rested on my lap, fingers smoothing the folded napkin I hadn't used, tracing the seam where the fabric creased and held the shape I'd given it. I felt, rather than saw, the server approach. Her steps quiet, careful not to draw attention. She paused just enough to meet my eyes, offering the slightest incline of her head, not rushed or forced. Her tray balanced easily on her forearm, and she held it steady when she shifted it to one side, clearing the empty glass in front of me with precise grace, setting down a new cup of tea as though it belonged there, as though I had asked for it. I blinked once, watching the steam curl upward in delicate spirals, catching the faint light above. She didn't speak much, only murmured a soft ma'am, polite, clear, then moved on to the next setting with the same quiet respect. The word landed strangely against the hollow of my chest, filling it without warning. I hadn't heard anyone use that for me all night. My fingers wrapped lightly around the cup, the ceramic warm even before I brought it close. I let it sit in my palms, feeling the slight tremor in my wrist, slow to stillness. Across the room, a cousin was retelling an old holiday story, but the details had been sanded smooth, my part of it gone, replaced with another name that everyone nodded at, satisfied. I watched their faces shift and light up, and felt the absence of my own name sit heavy at the base of my throat. But the server's eyes had found mine, not with familiarity, not with history, but with a calm certainty of seeing me there, acknowledging my space without needing contact. I swallowed once, my mouth dry despite the tea. On the other side of the room, a small boy twisted in his chair to look at me, his gaze lingering with frank curiosity before his mother touched his shoulder, whispering his name like an anchor. He glanced back, giving me a small, shy wave before turning away. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding, lowering my eyes to the cup. The warmth spread through my fingers, settling into the bones like something remembered, something earned. The chatter behind me didn't pause. The chairs scraped, the laughter rolled, but none of it asked me to rejoin. That was all right. I lifted the cup slightly, not in a toast but in acknowledgement of her courtesy, of the boy's curiosity, of my own presence still holding shape in the dim edge of the room. I set it down gently, adjusting the napkin once more on my knee until the fold sat even, precise. My eyes softened against the light, watching it gather on the surface of the tea, a quiet pool that reflected back, no one but me. The sound of laughter floated from across the room, light and low, bending around the walls as if to avoid me. I caught sight of him standing near the doorway. The shape of his shoulders relaxed, one hand tucked casually in his pocket, as he nodded at something someone was saying. His mouth curved in a small smile, polite, easy, the kind I'd seen 1,000 times when it had been meant for me. Our eyes met once. Not really met, more that his gaze passed over me, resting nowhere in particular. There was no flicker of recognition, no pause to adjust the line of conversation. He kept nodding, offering the faint upturn of his chin that used to mean stay, used to mean I see you. Now it landed on someone else, who laughed, tipping their glass his way. I watched the way he held his drink, the slow, calm swirl, wrist loose, as though nothing in this room could jar him. A memory pressed at the edge of my vision, half-formed, his fingers tapping gently on a table between us. A glance that said wait, a breath I didn't take until he did. The sound of a glass setting down with care. The pause before a quiet sure that ended an argument before it began. I blinked, and it was gone, replaced with the way he shifted now, crossing one foot over the other, leaning into someone else's story, letting their laughter carry him away. My tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, tasting old words I no longer had claim to. I didn't speak. I watched the corner of his mouth lift, just slightly, at the right moment in their exchange. My hand curled lightly at my side, fingers brushing my palm once before falling slack. I let the weight in my chest settle, not heavy exactly, but stubborn, cold in the places breath should have warmed. He didn't glance back, didn't check the space between us. I felt the stretch of air, the untouched floor, the ease with which I could have crossed it, but wouldn't. My foot shifted, heel catching lightly on the seam of the rug, grounding me in place. After a moment I turned, slow, letting my shoulder drop, my gaze slide away, as if the sight of him were too sharp at the edges to hold for long. I didn't expect him to follow it. I walked along the wall, fingers grazing the cool plaster, the sound of the party swallowing my steps without question. The last thing I saw before the corner turned was his profile, outlined clear against the glow of another conversation. No longer the shape of something I recognized, just a figure among many. The hallway narrowed as I stepped through, sound folding in slow behind me, the weight of muffled laughter and silver clinks dulling against the carpeted floor. I paused near the entrance to the dining room, fingers brushing the doorframe as though the grain in the wood might still remember me. Light spilled warm and layered across the long table, gathering brightest at the head where the chair I once chose with care now held someone else. I watched the way she sat there, posture attentive but easy, hand curled lightly around the stem of her glass, nodding at some compliment I couldn't hear. She turned to answer a question, with practiced calm, the laughter lifting from the group in a small, satisfied wave that made the candles tremble. My eyes landed on the napkins, folded into deliberate shapes. The pattern I'd insisted on once, repeated here without question. No one noticing the seam that used to run crooked when I folded them too fast. Someone poured her wine with a gentle flourish, the liquid catching the low light, and her fingers steadied the glass without needing to think. There was no pause in the conversation to acknowledge the way she'd stepped into the space. No empty seat saved. No sidelong glance for approval. She was simply there, as though she'd always been there, as though there had never been anyone else in that spot. I felt my hand hover over the back of a chair I wasn't going to take, the cool wood pressing into my palm for the briefest second before I let it go. The fabric of my dress whispered against itself as I shifted my weight, easing back a step, to give the space around them room to breathe. No one looked up. No one gestured for me to sit. Their voices merged in a hum of shared story, one that no longer needed my lines. I let my gaze drift across the table, catching the familiar gleam of a serving spoon I'd chosen for its weight. The shallow bowl curved just right to hold sauce without spilling. It rested in the dish I used to stir. The chairs were all aligned, none left ajar, no angle to wedge myself in. Even the light seemed to avoid where I stood, pooling instead on their faces, catching the edges of their glasses and the silver at their wrists. I pressed my lips together, let the breath leave my nose in a hush I didn't try to cover. My fingers slid from the chair back and fell to my side. I didn't move closer. I didn't call out. Instead, I shifted once more, stepping back into the hallway where the shadows gathered softer, taking one last look at the scene that no longer bent to include me. The last thing I saw was the faint reflection of myself in the sideboard's polished glass, blurred by the glow, almost swallowed by it, while her image shone clear and welcoming, exactly where I had once stood. The room settled into a hush that wasn't silence so much as anticipation, the air prickling with attention as the speaker adjusted the microphone. I sat back in my chair, fingers brushing the stem of my glass, watching the way the spotlight pooled in warm certainty on the far end of the table. His voice carried easily, practiced in these formalities, as he began thanking everyone who had made the event possible. I felt my back straighten without meaning to when he paused, letting the weight of gratitude settle over the room. He cleared his throat gently, then named someone else. The syllables fell clean and sure, no stumble, no question. Applause rose in answer, confident, unbroken, eager to confirm. He kept talking, voice rich with appreciation for the attention to detail, the floral design, the arrangement of the courses timed perfectly so the dishes landed hot but unhurried. I felt the words catch along my ribs, lodging there like something swallowed wrong. I remembered the lists in my planner, the color swatches fanned across my desk, but my name wasn't there. It didn't come. I blinked slowly, once, then again. The sound of hands meeting hands rolled over the floor in steady waves, polite and absolute. My fingers loosened around the glass, setting it down so gently, the bass barely whispered against the linen. I let my gaze travel the faces turned toward the speaker, each one lit with approval, easy smiles, small nods. No one turned my way. No one searched for what wasn't mentioned. At the edge of the front row, someone shifted. Her eyes flickered up, landing on me for half a breath, pupils tightening. Her lips parted like she might form something, an apology or a question, or nothing at all. Then she looked away, lashes dropping like a curtain, fingers pressing into her lap until the knuckles went pale. The applause didn't slow. The name was said again, clearer this time, like it belonged here more than I ever did. A chair scraped against the floor in acknowledgement. Another voice calling, "Well done!" Laughter bubbling up just behind it. I felt the corners of my mouth twitch without shape. The breath I held let out in a line I hoped no one heard. I lowered my eyes to the table, where the candlelight wavered and steadied with the shifting air. My hand smoothed the corner of my napkin until it lay flat and still, the crease sharp under my thumb. I didn't move. I didn't lift my gaze again. When I exhaled, it was slow enough to feel it leave every part of me it could. I stepped through the side door slowly, letting it ease shut behind me without a sound. No one turned. No voice called after. I stood there a moment, hand on the cool frame, feeling the vibration of distant laughter against the glass before it went still. The night air brushed across my face, calm and wide, tugging lightly at the hem of my sleeve. I didn't move quickly. I had no reason to. The patio was quiet, except for the faint hush of wind sliding over old stone. I let my shoes settle on it without protest, the weight of me pressing each groove, grounding. Above, the string lights cast a low glow that couldn't quite reach the edges of the yard, leaving pockets of darkness that felt oddly generous. I exhaled and listened to nothing. My fingers flexed once before falling open at my sides. I turned just enough to see inside through the glass. The room looked warmer from here, almost softer. They hadn't noticed I was gone. Plates lifted, glasses raised, conversation folding in and over itself like gentle surf. Someone's laugh broke free and filled the space I used to hold. I watched as they leaned in closer, bodies angled to keep the circle tight, faces bright under the chandelier. I didn't knock on the glass, didn't try to wave. My reflection caught faintly, doubled and pale in the pain. The movement inside blurred behind it, like watching someone else's memory replay. I saw my mouth move once in the glass, but heard no sound. My hand rested against the door, fingers splayed, then curled, then fell away. The wind picked up just enough to move the hair at my temple, to push against the hem of my coat so it shifted around my legs. I didn't fight it. I let it wrap and unwrap me, steadying my feet against the floor with a small shift of weight. I looked back one more time, watching the flicker of candlelight dance across the faces I'd memorized, seeing them glow without me. I let the silence in, not the cruel kind that cuts, but the deep, spacious quiet that leaves room to feel the truth without flinching. I was outside of it now, not missing, not forgotten, simply not required. The breath I let out was steady, long enough to feel my chest empty. I dropped my gaze to the patio stones, following the faint lines that split them apart. My fingers brushed the edge of the railing, finding no need to grip it. The world inside kept its own time. The world out here waited for nothing. My shoulders eased. I blinked once, slowly. The last thing I saw in the glass was that faint outline of me, transparent but whole, standing just far enough away that the light inside couldn't quite reach. I let the wind have the last word, eyes on the dark beyond the fence, breath leaving me quiet even. I stayed, not pulled, not pushed, just there. I stayed by the edge of the room, where the wall met the big glass pane that separated inside from out. The light from the chandelier pooled behind me but didn't warm the space I stood in. My eyes tracked the muted reflections on the glass, shapes moving in gold and cream, bending around the faint glare of candles. I felt the press of sound against my back, clinking forks, low conversation, the rise and fall of laughter too far to touch. I wasn't really watching them anymore. I was just there, breathing. Mingai, Afternoon, past hours, letting the space hold me. He came up from the side, not urgent, not even aware of what he was about to do. His suit was a little rumpled, hair windblown from a cigarette break outside. Someone's +1, a voice I didn't recognize. That made it worse. He didn't face me directly, just shifted closer to make space for someone passing with drinks. His glance was offhanded, resting on the table where I'd set a napkin with the careful fold that had always felt like mine alone to get right. "That's the one you used to do, isn't it?" It landed with no weight at all in his voice. Casual, almost polite, but it hit me like a sound from the bottom of a well. My breath caught, not loud, not even visible. I felt the muscle of my neck tighten. My fingers flattened against the side seam of my dress. I didn't answer. My mouth might have parted, but nothing left it. His gaze flickered back at me once, hesitated like he sensed something shift. He didn't apologize. He didn't clarify. He just seemed to register that he'd touched something he didn't mean to. Then he glanced away, adjusting his cuff with a shrug before stepping back into the warm pool of voices behind us. I was still facing the glass. My eyes found the dimmed shape of the napkin where I'd left it on the table, the fold catching the spill of light from above. It was still perfect, untouched, like it didn't matter who had made it. My lashes lowered halfway, The world on the other side of the glass continued moving in soft blurs. The laughter didn't waver. The storytelling bent around the shape of the new person who belonged there. I didn't turn away immediately. I felt the words he'd spoken echo in the space just behind my ears. My fingers twitched once, curling into themselves slow, pressing the seam of the dress until the fabric dented. I breathed in through my nose, slow enough to feel the coolness fill my chest. The breath out was quieter, but deeper. My heart didn't race. It just steadied. I looked at the reflection, eyes narrowing to really see it. The shape there wasn't as dim as before. The mouth closed firm, the shoulders leveled. No tremor in the line of my jaw. I didn't smile. I didn't move. But I saw myself, and she was there. The last thing I noticed before blinking was how the light finally caught the crease of the napkin, just so, sharpening it into clear relief, like it was waiting to be claimed. I sat near the end of the table, the edge of the linen brushing against my wrist where my hand rested light. The conversation hummed at a safe distance. Voices overlapped in polite agreement. Cutlery met china in tidy beats. I let it all happen without watching. I had learned the shape of my silence here. A server passed behind me, tray balanced with ease, leaning just enough to clear a chair. He slowed by my shoulder without meaning to. His eye caught the small pin clipped at the inside of my coat where the lapel had shifted open. A mark. A seal. Not decorative. Official. He paused. Just enough. Breath caught in his throat. His mouth opened, closed. Then he cleared it and straightened without comment. But that second of delay, that faint click of recognition in his eye, felt louder than any announcement. Someone else noticed. A relative halfway down the table who'd spent most of the evening ignoring my side of the room. Their words faltered. A laugh tripped. Fork lowered to a plate with a muted chime. Silence didn't fall. It folded. No one asked. No one named it. But the noise changed. Tightened. A story cut short without a punchline. Someone filled their glass too full, watching the liquid tip dangerously near the rim before setting the bottle down too hard. I didn't move. My fingers rested against the table, tips brushing the weave. I could feel the room pivot around me, slow and uneven. Eyes shifted, faces recalibrated. The glow of the chandelier seemed to flatten, light landing on my profile in sharper lines. They didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Even those who had laughed too loud earlier didn't try to joke now. A cousin glanced my way, blinked, eyes catching on mine before darting down to his lap. The server left without a word. But when he passed, he adjusted the pin back to where it sat flat, almost respectfully. The weight of his fingers through the cloth felt grounding. I let my gaze sweep the table. No malice, no apology. Just there, seeing them see me. My shoulders didn't shift. My chin stayed level. I didn't reach for my glass. The linen under my palm stayed smooth. Around me, the conversation struggled, stumbled, found a new shape that didn't dare exclude me outright, but couldn't claim me easily either. A held breath that never quite exhaled. I blinked once. Slow. Let the room settle. My fingers tapped once, deliberate before going still. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to remind them. The truth was there. Obvious. Exposed. And I just sat in it. Eyes steady. Mouth closed. Holding space that suddenly felt like mine again. Even if no one spoke it aloud. I pushed the chair back slow, careful not to scrape the floor. The sound it made was a hush, more felt than heard. My fingers brushed the linen napkin resting in my lap. I set it on the table deliberately, folding it once with the edge squared, leaving it behind like a signature I didn't need to defend. No one blocked me. No voices rose. A few chairs shifted just enough to let me pass. Heads dipped. Some found their glasses interesting. Others watched without blinking, eyes adjusting to this new truth that didn't need naming. The cousin who had laughed the loudest earlier lowered his gaze to the plate, fork still in hand. motionless. Someone cleared their throat but never finished the sound. Another sipped wine, swallowed slow, glass trembling against teeth. I didn't hurry. My shoes found the floor steady, the soft click of heel a patient rhythm. The world around me thinned its noise to let it in. I felt the shift like breath being held too long. When I reached the end of the table, I paused. I could sense someone about to speak, voice caught in the space behind my shoulder. But it didn't come out clean. "Excuse me." Hesitant, unsure, nothing like before. I didn't turn fully. My head tilted half a degree, acknowledging without inviting. The words died. I heard the speaker let them drop. The hush spread like ink in water. I looked at the sideboard where they'd set my old place card earlier in the evening, not even bothering to write my name on it, just "other" in cheap pen. I picked it up without ceremony, set it square on the table's edge. The blank side turned out. I didn't need it anymore. My fingers lifted from it with calm. I turned back to the room, letting my eyes travel over each face, not rushing. Some met it, then skittered away. Others tried to hold it but broke first. I didn't need them to. I wasn't here for that. The chandelier above didn't flicker, but the light felt different, clearer, sharper on the polished glass of the table. It caught the edge of the silverware, lit the untouched wine like a gemstone in quiet display. I let out a breath, not heavy, not resigned, just there, even, kneel. My shoulders stayed level, chin neither lifted nor dropped, just straight. I stepped toward the door with measured weight, each footfall solid but unforced. Behind me, no one followed, but they watched. I could feel the room change shape around my absence. When I reached the threshold, I rested a hand on the frame. The wood was cool, honest. It didn't protest when I pushed away. The last thing I heard was the clink of a glass being set down softer than before, the muted thud of someone pulling in a shaky breath, the curtains catching a breeze through the cracked window. I didn't turn back. The chair I left behind remained open, the napkin folded just so. Light lingered on it, like a spotlight left on an empty stage. And for the first time all night, no one tried to fill the silence I left behind.